I'd just like to start off talking to the ship owners in particular about how the ratification and then the entry into force is changing the perspective for them, whether it has, whether it will, whether you're going beyond or beneath. You know, what does this add up to, and how do you think it'll change the market? Could I turn to you, Annette, first of all, for your perspective from Wallenius Wilhelmsen?
Of course, thank you, Julian. I think initially we are really pleased that it has been ratified. We are a strong advocate for a level playing field, as has been discussed earlier on today. We really need that in an industry as ours, which is so international and subject to kind of local, national, international, and the global regional regulations. Will it change how we work? Wallenius Wilhelmsen has a long history in responsible ship recycling. We have had a policy. We have been a founding member, one of the founding members of the SRTI. And we have a responsible ship recycling policy and also a human rights policy. We have since 2009 recycled 32 vessels in a responsible manner. That means that we have vetted the yards before we select them and have supervision by external surveyors that it's being done in the right manner, and also completion report outwards. And we report on, as part of the SRTI, on which vessels and where they have been recycled. So I don't think it will change the way we work. Coming back to the good presentation by Nick, I think there are other regulations coming from the EU. We are a listed company in Norway, so subject to EU regulations, both from the Sustainability Reporting Directive, but also the Due Diligence Directive. And that means that it looks at the whole value chain, not only our own operations and inside what we can directly control, but we have responsibility throughout the supply chain, both upstream and also downstream. So in that respect, we will still have to be compliant.
Gunther, like Wallenius Wilhelmsen, you've actually paid money to have ships recycled to the levels that you've been aspiring to in recent years. Does the entry into force of the Hong Kong Convention change the game for you in any particular way? And do you think the actors you're working with will be changed by the entry into force?
I'm afraid, although we are definitely pleased that the Hong Kong Convention has been ratified finally, we still have a long way to walk until, I think some of you guys even calculated the seconds and minutes until June 2025. No, we are around now for 176 years, a German-based company, so that means we are also tightly married to the EU SRR, and actually we have committed in our recycling policy, which is clearly visible on our webpage and also part of, similar as Annette mentioned, we are also a founding member of the Ship Recycling Transparency Initiative. So that's where we are. We have committed ourselves to the EU SRR. We are strictly adhering it. And when it comes to reflagging, we don't see a level playing field. Actually, you will be astonished about what I'm going to say. Yes, we reflagged the ship, which recently went to a facility in Turkey, to the German flag, to be fully compliant, to be absolutely sure to be by the book. So please understand, I'm not going to talk about money and prices. We are with competitors here.
I think historically you had, but I appreciate that. But it costs money to do that sort of thing,
yeah.
Basically. Yeah.
Nothing is for free.
Nothing is for free. Jessie Lynn Lai from Maersk, could I ask you the same
Sure.
point? Obviously, Maersk has a long track record in aspiring to high standards. You've taken a few steps forward and a few steps back on times, but where do you stand today with the entry into force?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to share. Because likewise, we are also a founding member of the SRTI because we believe that information is key. By publishing all the past and present information, it will empower people to make decisions, and it impacts the entire value chain on how maritime or ship recycling is being perceived. And of course, we welcome any feedback. And since 2016, we have developed the Responsible Ship Recycling Standard that is to provide guidance in the absence of overarching guidelines or conventions that is in effect presently. So I think from our experience working with our shipyards, we have seen good results in terms of like not having any health or safety incidents being reported since 2017. We believe it's a good indicator that this model works for us, and we strongly encourage the broader industry to adopt similar standards and pursue a greater ambition to set a better direction for the entire industry.
Sotiris at the far end, we just heard from three of the biggest, three of the most committed European, Scandinavian ship owners on this issue. Does the ratification clarify the position for more broadly European ship owners? And what concerns have you got about these lingering and very deep-seated contradictions and how they can be resolved?
I think there are reasons to be optimistic after the ratification of the Hong Kong Convention. To be honest with you, when we visited with the Norwegian ambassador, Bangladesh, it was 4 months ago, 5 months ago. Nobody really believed that Bangladesh will ratify the convention. And we're quite pessimistic that we're running out of time and that the Hong Kong Convention will never be ratified or enter into force. It's a tremendous success. The fact that we have a global standard in place. This is a reason to be optimistic. The other reason to be optimistic is to look at the progress made, the real tremendous progress made in the yards, in India, in Bangladesh, even in anticipation of having a global standard in place. And to be honest with you, the EU ship recycling regulation also played a role there. On the other hand, there are reasons to be pessimistic. And I would start with taking a look at the geopolitical situation and with the EU becoming more cautious towards open trade and introducing certain regulations, not only to enhance the environmental standards, but also as in a way to repatriate back to the EU industrial activities. And this is also a situation that we need to deal with. For instance, there was a document leaked this morning that the US and the EU are seriously considering to introduce tariffs, import tariffs on steel and aluminium up to 25% in the next few weeks. So we're seeing that the geopolitical environment is changing, is quite unstable, and this is also reflected in the environmental regulations we're dealing with. I don't need to repeat or list the number of the regulations that are in place, both at international and EU level, but we shouldn't give up. I think that we made a tremendous progress the last few months, and we should keep pushing. We should bring more into the front line positive stories about the progress, the tremendous progress made in the yards in India and in Bangladesh, and to engage also more the European policymakers. It's unfortunate that they're not present here today, but it's not only the Commission. Some people may think that the EU operates like the IMO. It's the opposite. We deal with politicians, elected politicians, and we need to deliver the message from our industry. Some people said that it's not a big deal because it's the European regulations. Still though, EU companies control 40% of the global fleet.
Thank you. I'd like to come back, if we have time, to talk a little more about the impact of the European provisions and the possible amendments there. Before we do that, though, Kamiko, may I ask you for your perspective from the Japanese Shipowners Association?
Thank you very much for sharing us. For us, Japanese owners, the news of the implementation of the Hong Kong Convention is just a really optimistic news for us. And for a long time advocate for the HKC, for us, it's a really fruitful news. And we are partially really contribute to, we are proud to contribute to make it implemented. As a JSA, we have recommended to major member companies that they sell their ships for recycling yards that comply with the HKC even before the requirement of the activation has not been fulfilled. And many members had actually selected excellent yards complying with the HKC as buyers of their ships. I think maybe those good shipping companies, European shipping companies, many of our members, Japanese companies, actually sell the ships, the HKC compliant yard, referring to the Class NK certificate. And some of them even added to their own elements, additionally to the HKC element, like IHM. They voluntarily already prepared the IHM before they sell their ships to the yards. And as the JSA also send a delegation to the yard, India, Bangladesh, China, more than 10 times for this decade, and together with the Japanese government, Class NK, even labor unions. So we believe those actions contribute and motivate to yards, recycling yards, to upgrade by themselves. And so...
thank you, Kamiko, for that. Let's leave it there.
Sorry, it's become too long.
No. Thank you so much. Anil, okay. Anil Sharma, could I put to you, yesterday morning, despite the optimism around the ratification that, as Sotira said, that even people quite close to this a few months ago were not actually believing would happen, it did come through. But we heard from Haresh Parmar from India, who accused the world's ship owners, collectively, many of them larger ship owners, of course, of what he colourfully said were games of convenience that was helping to drive down prices and avoid their responsibilities. For the Hong Kong Convention to be a force, it needs to be complied with, and the national governments will need to uphold their standards. Do you believe the frameworks of the national governments in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India, and possibly Pakistan, will be able to maintain those frameworks to hold the yards to adequate standards?
Let me start. First, I'll answer your question, but I want to also go back to some of the responses we have received here. The easy answer is yes and no, meaning some of the governments will be. We have a 2-year runway, and especially when it comes to India, there was a long runway ahead of us. In fact, next week, as you know, there's a huge conference in India on Maritime Summit, and there was a huge session on ship recycling with a lot of world players at stage. So there's a strong commitment from the Indian government to do that. I see also the same kind of commitment coming out of Bangladesh that's coming in. So I think that will be there. There'll be a lot of debates and discussions about industry standards. So I think that can be done. Pakistan, I'm not too sure. I saw Saif Ali Khan's presentation. There is an attempt, but I can't comment on that. I think they're a bit behind. But I want to say something, because when I hear the ship owners here, and what you said was the very beginning opening statement, that the D word, right? And this should not, this is the only conference you're not going to hear the D word. I'm going to bring up the D word in a second. But what you had here was the H word, right? The Hong Kong Convention. And when I heard the speakers, it dawned on me, I wish I had a pen and paper. I was realizing when a ship owner sells a ship, especially a European ship owner, he or she, they have lots of risks they have to address, right? You have your environmental, social, governance, operational, technical, financial, technological, whatever you can. So there would be about 5 to 10 risks that they have to address. What I find is when you're a listed European company, your biggest risk becomes your headline risk. Last thing an owner wants to see is themselves being on the front page of your newspaper for the wrong reasons, right? Even if the appearances have done everything great, it's still the appearance is there. So as a result, you're ready to give up the financial, everything else to come into the, to make sure you cover the headline risk. My view is very clear. You cannot have sustainable ship recycling without taking into consideration economic risks. As a gentleman who asked in a previous session, that I'm going to build a ship in Europe, flag it Europe, and will you give me cheap money or loans and residual values? That risk has to be there. I mean, the financial value has to be there. Business cannot run on sustainability forever without saying there is no regard to economic value. So what we are trying to create now is, first of all, standards, and then how you create value and sustainability. And why I'm bringing the D word, the decarbonization, we have got the whole ship recycling narrative wrong. We just have it wrong. We have been concentrating on EU versus HKC for the last 10 years. The real thing is, because we are talking about a circular economy and climate change and decarbonization, think for a minute how ship recycling plays a role. At least in India alone, I think we must have recycled about 65 million tons of steel so far. So what does it mean? First, let's look at the value. Why the Indian subcontinent pays more money than the yards in Europe? Very simple. 90% of a ship is steel. Now in India, out of this, I'm using India as an example. Out of that 90% of the steel, 70% is going to go straight into rolling mills. There is no melting furnace. 10% is going to go into a melting furnace. Another 10% is going to go straight repurpose, reuse. That's the economic value. Now take it to Europe. You recycle a ship in Europe, 85% of the steel is going to go into melting scrap. Either into a furnace in Europe, or you will transport it to Turkey, and I think Turkey said right now maybe we have too much scrap. So that goes in. So where decarbonization comes in, I'm just closing. So the three biggest, if you want to use the word polluters to the environment, is first is energy production, through coal and whatever else. Second is industrials, making steel. Third is transportation. I mean, maybe the order is different. So now when you recycle all this steel, you're addressing the issue of this energy. Less energy is needed to recycle, reuse a vessel. There is less transportation, and the industrials, the steel making, you're reduce the use. So that's where the value is coming. So HKC is creating this playing field. Yes, that's just another vertical, the regulation.
You raise a very interesting issue there, and I'd like to discuss this with the owners. Jesse Lin, Maersk, you have had investigations into perhaps constructing your own recycling yard and turning that into a green steel feeder for your ships. Is that project ongoing? What results are there? And do you feel that having that process as part of your own supply chain can genuinely be seen as a sustainability asset for you as a company?
Yeah, I think this is the only way for us to move forward sustainably and really close the loop when it comes to circular economy for ship building and ship recycling, because if we don't source sustainably and start having green steel as part of your shipbuilding when you order the new vessels, there's no way that we can raise the value of scrap metal from ship recycling. So it has to start from there. And I think with that in place, with that mindset in place, then you could empower the yards to be able to raise the value and close the loop. And of course, it needs to be a requirement when you put in the order for your new vessels. So
sorry.
Yeah.
Please go on.
We don't have the specific project that we are able to finalize and announce at this moment, but we're setting that, and we have few partners that are currently in talks with to go ahead with this strategy. And when you're talking about a lot of the smelters, steel mills are still really powering with coal and conventional fuels, it's not ideal at the present moment, because it's just we're not rethinking steel production in a sustainable manner at this point.
It's a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
There's an issue with the production.
Exactly. So for MERS, right now we have managed to break the whole greenfield chicken and egg debate, and hopefully, the next step for us is able to deal with green steel direction.
And the Wallenius Wilhelmsen companies and those you have stakes in are very closely involved with customers, the shippers who are close to consumer markets. So things such as their green footprint, fuels are very important to you and your clients. Does the green recycling, the green steel aspect potentially of recycling responsibly add something to your sustainability footprint for your customers as yet? And if not yet, do you think it will come?
Not yet, but I think definitely it will come. We've seen the same journey. We have the OEMs, so the car manufacturers, as our key clients. They're doing that on aluminium, increasing their recycling and moving from steel to aluminium. So I think this will come to us too, but it's not there yet. I think that the moment is the D word, decarbonization, which is key.
Wolfram?
Well, personally, I would agree to the possibility to explore what can be done with regards to green steel. Whereas I think we have clearly to realize that we have to get a clear order how to straighten out things. And I have to come to the regulatory aspects. We have to straighten out the interaction between Hong Kong Convention, EU SRR, the Basel Convention. How will this be integrated with regards to the downstream waste management? And what I would also like to emphasize, I'm not downplaying what we are discussing here. This is just one small Lego brick in the whole spiel. We have greenhouse gas reduction, we have corporate responsibility, social responsibility, biodiversity, protection of whales was mentioned briefly. It is really in our shop 3 pillars which we really want to fill with life. So to get the regulatory landscape plain, that's really the challenging task which is ahead of us until June 2025. And yeah, you are right with the furnaces, with the coal, and we have now the Fit for 55 onshore power supply for all European ports as from January 1st, 2030. Where is the electricity coming from? Is it coming from brown coal or other coal? And I'm switching off my clean auxiliary engines. So what I want is, I don't want to distract. It's a huge wide ocean where we are sailing currently. So without downplaying, this is one piece, but we have really to follow the small baby steps first. Straighten the regulatory landscape, please regulators, and that we have legal certainty as ship owners and don't get a dawn raid visit. Don't quote that.
let's see about that. Sotiris, we've heard from the three last speakers. They have probably at least 1,000 ships on the water between them, and they are at the top level involved in consumer markets ultimately with their customers. There are an awful lot of ship owners, even still in Europe, as you say, with 40% of the world fleet, that really are not even close to that, and a lot of smaller owners as well in particular. Is talk of green steel and the circular economy relevant to the small European ship owner? And if not, how can it be made relevant and important to them?
I would agree that the first thing that we need to address urgently is the uncertainty, the legal uncertainty we're dealing with. I'm going to give you an example. The Basel ban entered into force December 2019. Up to that point, the Commission went and inspected yards in Alang in India. They made concrete comments, they published the reports. We were assessing also their own reports. We were pushing the Commission to do the final step and approve these yards into the EU list. What happened with the Basel ban? Out of the blue. Although everybody knew that the Basel ban will enter into force in December 2019, and as mentioned before, the EU had already transposed into the EU law the Basel ban for many years already. The Commission said that their legal interpretation is that after the Basel ban entered into force, they're not even allowed to go and assess the yards in Alang. Just to have a measure of the scale of the uncertainty we're facing and we're dealing with at EU level. And it took a new law to be proposed and go through all the legislative process in Brussels, the waste shipment regulation, to get the Commission to open again this legal possibility to assess the yards and get them into the list. So from our point of view, we need to urgently address the legal uncertainty. We have three main blocks: the Basel ban and the waste shipment regulation, the EU ship recycling regulation, and the Hong Kong Convention. To add on top of that, taxonomy. Somebody from the previous speakers mentioned taxonomy, which is quite important not only to the listed companies, but to everybody, to all shipping companies. It regulates access of the companies to financing. And the EU ship recycling regulation is on the list of the do no significant harm, meaning that even if you run a zero-emission ship tomorrow, you can be disqualified for green financing because somebody in the Commission might consider that you don't tick all the boxes of the EU ship recycling regulation. So we need urgently legal certainty, a global level playing field, and of course, sound environmental and safety standards.
I can only hear on that. It's such an important area, and I sometimes feel there are lots of politicians, and they will say, well, we expect the private industry to help here. And that's fine. We will find, as you're talking about the economics, we will find the most effective, efficient way of getting there, but they need to take the responsibility to provide the framework that we can navigate in. And I think that's one of the biggest risks, because when we have that, the ones that are sustainable and finding the right solutions, they will be the ones that are surviving and in the future and being economical and profitable.
Yeah, but if I may, I mean, that's my point. If you had the open forum to do that, you could, but then you have this big regulatory issue. You don't want that knock on the door, right? No. Or you don't want a headline risk, and that just ties your hand. Even if you believe so.
I have the impression in this debate, and I guess it isn't really the forum to try and get down to the nuts and bolts of how to unpack this, but there isn't much optimism, to use that warm, fluffy word, that this can be solved or will be solved in the near or even the medium term. Sotiris, I mean, if we could ask you, I mean, you are closest to this. Is that a fair interpretation?
I'm by nature optimistic, to be honest with you, and nobody believed that we're going to get the Hong Kong Convention get ratified 5 months before. I mean, if it's a pragmatic approach, I think that we should take up on the fight, bring up the positive stories, make also concrete proposals. How can we change the situation? And bring also the policymakers into the game to get them engaged. I don't think that we should be pessimistic. We should give the fight.
Sure. Anil, how do you see this this uncertainty and the nervousness amongst ship owners playing out when it comes to day-to-day business and actually delivering ships that need to be recycled?
Yeah, that is a concern, right? Because the regulation has put itself into knots now, right? I mean, you have the HKC, the EU SSR. Naim, if you could, I mean, I had my guy said, what are these various regulations where some people may not even understand? So I made him a crude little boxes of all these regulations that exist right now, right? So here we have all this Basel and HKC on one side, and then you have all these regulations in Europe on the other side. Just stack them up. So when you stack this regulation, HKC is supposed to take care of all these boxes, right? Will it? The regulation has to make a decision. Probably not. These 4 boxes should actually go like that. And really this box should remain, but it won't happen, you know? Sorry. But I mean, this was the closest regulation. So my point is, the HKC should be doing that, but it's going to be a challenge, you know, because the Basel certainly comes in, the ban amendment comes into play. That's for Satori and his team to figure it out, how they're going to come out of it, and that requires guts. And you said I'm glad you said you're optimistic, because you really need the support and the will to people to educate themselves. That, you know, it was well-meaning regulation at one stage, but now IMO has come up with this nice little regulation. Even if you look at the effectiveness in the last 10 years since EUSRR and HKC has come, the role. Now you have Maersk and you know, MSC and those guys who are coming to India, they're saying we like HKC, right? And they're making an attempt to do it, and seems like they're having success with that. But if for your rightful reasons, you have a policy that you don't want to go to India, which I respect that as well. So I think there's a lot of dynamics here at play, and the main issue is regulation. Nobody wants a knock, number one, and number two is the headline risk. Once you take away these 2 shackles, I think you can make much more sensible, I don't know if sensible.
Anil, don't get me wrong. We didn't say we are not going to India. We need your progressive yards on the EU SRR list. That's the request.
Yeah, but because you're making the assumption that EU SSR list is a better list than HKC, which it isn't. Right.
But that's the legal requirement.
That's what I say, it's a legal
we are adhering to by all means. Yeah. No discussion. Sorry.
Yeah, 3 hours on Sentosa Island, a little later. So Kumiko, could I just ask you? Luckily for you, the EU SRR is on the floor.
Yes.
But you do have the Hong Kong Convention, the Basel Convention, and the Basel ban because you're an OECD country. How is that playing out for your members, and how is that managed by your members? Those contradictions.
We'd like to say we have to concentrate on now the Hong Kong Convention. EU SRR must be amended in line with the Hong Kong Convention, just in accordance with its own article, I understand. But of course, I know it is difficult and still it takes much time, so you're a bit struggled with that. But still, now we need Hong Kong concentrate on the Hong Kong Convention, and we need Hong Kong Convention compliant yards and increase more and more. And yeah, that's our hope. And Basel Convention, I understand it's a bit difficult, but Basel Convention should be exempted the Hong Kong Convention, and owners export their ships in accordance with the Hong Kong Convention should be totally free from Basel Convention. Of course, I know it's difficult, but it should be, we hope. Maybe all of us hope the same, I understand.
Thank you. Wolfram, a question on the app from Henning again, Henning Grumman. Thank you, Henning. Asking, do you carry out due diligence audits before selling your ships for recycling, and how do you ensure that the requirements are fulfilled? And in the case there's a cash buyer, would you consider his team or her team of supervisors, or is the risk of conflict of interest too huge?
Actually, we have a vendor in the situation contracted now for many years. Very well-known, reliable contractor. And I'm afraid I cannot comment on the details, but that's in place. The philosophy, you have a supervisor in the shipyard when you are building a ship. You have a supervisor in the shipyard when you are dismantling a ship. That's it in a nutshell.
It's the same thing. So we had you do vetting of the yards from an ESG point of view, and then have an independent supervisor to follow the process and make sure that it's done according to the requirements. I think that will remain due to all the regulations. You have to be responsible for who you choose to partner and who you sell to.
You have to own the process, effectively.
You do, and I think I just need to make one case. We're kind of talking about how regulation is driving this, but I think for many of the peers here and the partners in SRTI, when they started working on responsible ship recycling, it was not a regulation, it was a moral imperative and the right thing to do. And I think we can also lead and do the best we can to be responsible and live up to our own values.
Mm-hmm. There's another question here from Anonymous, which I always like the anonymous questions. That was why the app was invented, in fact. Yeah. He's asking a rather pointed question about how much sustainable recycling is going on at the Brownsville yard in the US, and making some rather some allegations that maybe we'll move over. But I mean, is anybody aware of Sotiris? You know, no. Anybody have any insight into that? No. Anil, going back to that question about the oversight of the audits, should cash buyers representatives be trusted to conduct the audits of the due diligence audits for recycling?
So my view is, if you have the resources like our panelists here have it, they should have their own person. You know, it makes it cleaner. We have PR sitting there, which spends so there are people who can do that. But then there are owners who don't have the resources. And if indeed we want to do it in a sustainability, that's where we come in. I think the program we have, this SSORP, it's because I've heard all these issues, and I like to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So that's why we created this. We have done 100, 110, but we're not competing with the main guys. We are just offering it to people who otherwise cannot commit the resources.
Last question for me before I'm very happy to take any questions from the floor. A little earlier today, we've heard various suggestions that increasingly the ship owners, particularly listed ship owners, particularly ship owners in OECD countries with a close relationship with consumer markets, they are increasingly selling their ships before the end of life because they simply do not wish to be engaged in the recycling process because it is too dangerous for them, it is too risky, and there's clearly a business case. Do you think that is, and I'd like to put it to the three major owners here, do you think that is an increasing trend and a likelihood that few end-of-life ships will be owned by those types of owners? Annette, do you see that as a growing likelihood?
I wouldn't like to answer on behalf of other companies. I think it comes back to the intention. I cannot see Wallenius Wilhelmsen doing that because the intention is to avoid the recycling part of the vessel's life. That I cannot see. But of course, if there are earlier in the vessel's life commercial reasons and practical market reasons for selling, that could be, but not to avoid our responsibility.
Jessalyn, you obviously at Maersk, you do see the possibility of a genuinely circular process in this. So you see the end of life being a key part of the business cycle.
Absolutely. That is a yes for us because we only sell directly to the yard owners, and there will be restrictive clauses for cash buyers in this situation.
Thanks. Any questions before we wrap up? Please. Haresh. Double microphones. Just tap on the end, Harish, and they should get...
Yeah, hello.
Yeah.
It's not a question, it's my just request to Ship Owners Association that India, I just said that more than 50 yards are Class NK certified yard, but few of the owners are concentrating on the few yards only. So our request is that you have to monitoring the maximum number of yards and can approve for the new yards also. Then it will be, we have invested a more huge amount, each and every yard invested a huge amount. So if everybody can get the benefit for that. That is my request to all ship owners.
Any other questions? One down here in the front again. Thanks,
Thank you. My question is, as all the big team is here from the ship owner side, and also Mr. Sharma, and with a live example, he has explained very much. But can we have a thought on ship recycling as a service? Like ban amendment is saying, the export, waste export we cannot do, EU SSR, waste regulations of the EU. But we can recycle the ship and send back the waste to the EU. Is there? Or we can do a service, we can do on the profit sharing. As a ship recycling, as a ship recycler, it will be a win-win situation for both. Ship owner as well as...
repatriating the waste back to Europe.
Back to Europe.
Any takers?
Yeah. Just to have opinion.
I mean, this has been our argument for a long time, that we shouldn't split up the market between OECD and non-OECD countries. And it's not my position to say what the Commission would reply, or European policymakers. We're doing a lot of work with European politicians. Their first question or comment when we come up with this argument is, fine, but demand will create eventually supply. It's a very simplistic, probably naive argument to make, but this is the mindset of the people that sometimes regulate the industry. That's why my point was that we need to spread these positive stories and make them more engaged in ship recycling to understand better the industry.
Hello. Yeah, actually, I've been attending Tradewinds conference for last 13 years, I think. So 13 years back, the ship owners looked confused, like they were not sure that where to send the vessels. They wanted more HKC yards. So we put a lot of effort and made so many HKC yards now, and most of the yards are empty. And the ship owners today and yesterday, I heard all the ship owners, they still look confused. And they are talking about now EU standards, HKC, Basel Amendment, Basel ban. So it's a very difficult situation for the ship recyclers that we have invested $10 to $15 million to upgrade the facility, and we have done so much work. Only the people that comes to the yard or the facility appreciates. Like we had sororities about 4 months back in the yard, and they were surprised that in Bangladesh so many yards are developed, even the Japanese Ship Owners Association. So we need to engage more, I think, with the European Commission, that they are not coming out of their shell. So they need to come out, and I think EXA and BIMCO and those kind of people can influence them. They need to engage more. In 2015, I was invited at EXA to give a presentation, and I was really surprised that most of the ship owners were so relaxed about the EU regulation, and they were not putting any efforts to change. Whereas ship recyclers, we were pushing that EU regulation shouldn't come. So I think we need a situation where you should say enough is enough. We want to send our vessels to HKC compliant yards, and come, let's do something together. I think that will be the way forward, I guess.